Yeah, so you just gotta turn the mic. You gotta turn the mic on the mic, and then it should come out automatically. The volume level should be set.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Sorry, give me one more real quick.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
What? Why is the...
Test, test, test. Ooh. Oh, that's some nice sound. Crisp. Oh. Can you hear me? Hello? Oh my god, big Hello? Test, test. Test, test, test. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
1, 2. 1, 2. Testing, testing, 1, 2. Hey, hey. How's your input volume? Can I turn mine down like that? Or is that too low? Is it still there? Yes or no? Hey, hey, 1, 2. Okay. Is it still there?
Is the buzz still there? Hey, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2. Microphone check. Hey, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you try something else? Still buzzing now. Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2. Still there? Hey, 1, 2, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2. And how's the volume? Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2.
I don't know if it's a word, but I'm trying to pick up a size small. Fortunately, you can still reach out and say, wait, it's not the logistical side. That, you don't have to worry about. That's going to be used for 1 minute. You use the back of the bus. Watch out for this guy over there.
Okay. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Hobart. I'm the chairman of the World Affairs Council here in Orange County. Welcome everybody back after a little 1-month hiatus. Thank you, Judge Gray. For those of you who have just gotten involved with the council, we usually take a little bit of downtime in August, and we're back and running with our AGM tonight, our annual general meeting. We'll spare you with too long of some of the business that we need to do, but we will take a few minutes for those of you attending for your first event this evening to introduce our new trustees, etc. So we're looking forward to that. For those of you who haven't been here before, we've been here for over 50 years, the World Affairs Council here in Orange County. I mean, I've always been amazed the level of speakers that have come here over the years. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit, and I mean, we've had everything from Gorbachev to Nixon to, we've had Secretary Bolton, we've had Congressman Schiff, Congressman Graham. So we really go the whole spectrum of trying to get people on all sides of issues. Tonight I actually saw chatting together some, not candidates, but some people that are involved, deeply involved on campaigns, chatting together. So this is kind of the night off. It is a night, we don't avoid issues, but it is a time to kind of come and learn about things from all sides of perspective of things. In the last 12 months, we've had former CIA Director and Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta spoke to us. On Russia, we had Fiona Hill and General Peter Zwack, the former attaché for the Army for our Army for Russia. And then we also even had the recently retired commander of the Indo-Pacific, Admiral Phil Davidson, came in. He talked to us about a wide range of issues. Very interesting conversation. So before I go too much further, Helen Haig, she's one of our trustees, executive board members. Could you come up here and really quickly lead us, not quickly, but if you could lead us in the pledge this evening, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Helen. Really quickly, I'd like to thank Lindsay and Sydney. Could you raise your hands? This is our staff who has been working very hard to put on the event. And also in his event for the first time in his full capacity as our new president, Dr. Richard Downey is up front here this evening. He'll be my understanding is he's still on the road. Dr. Green was smart and came up early, but we will have a special guest here this evening, the Consul El Sulatin, so he'll be walking in very shortly, so definitely take the opportunity to chat with him afterwards if you can. We have former presidential and vice presidential candidate Jim Gray, retired Judge Jim Gray here this evening. And we have some students. I really want to thank people. We recently added to our registration process the option to be able to sponsor students. And we've now been getting 12 students per event as a result of people when they go and sign up sponsoring students. So if any of the students could raise their hands this evening, I'd appreciate it. There we go. Thank you, everybody who's been doing that. Upcoming events. I want to kind of go through some of our upcoming events, maybe on the screen over there. On the 25th of this month, we have on the 25th this month, we have the annual trustee luncheon over at Balboa Bay Club. So our trustees get together each year to kind of go through the official business of the council, and it's over on the 25th for those of you who will be attending on Sunday the 25th at Balboa Bay Club. On October 6th, we have a special event. It's actually what we're trying to do here is do a panel on immigration, a wide range of views. So we have an academic coming in, we have somebody from the enforcement side coming in, and then we have somebody who's also involved with employment. So he's actually an employment lawyer coming in to have a conversation, wide-ranging conversation on immigration on October 6th. So registration has opened up for that, so I encourage you guys to sign up early. We do expect that one to sell out. Then we just found out today on November 3rd, we're going to have the former U.S. ambassador to Brazil, coming in. Ambassador Todd Chapman will be coming to town to talk a few days after likely the second round ends of the Brazilian election on the 30th. So a few days after, he'll be on a two-person panel with a high-profile, one of two high-profile diplomats from Brazil also flying in. So it should be a very fascinating event. Then for those of you who have not ever been out to our national conference that takes place each November, highly suggest it, really interesting. Dozens of speakers that are there over the course of 3 or 4 days. Absolutely fascinating. You get to go and sit in on think tanks, different embassies. I mean, you're sitting in a room with 6 people that are all top think tank people that you see every Sunday on TV. So it really is an interesting opportunity to see a little bit more about what the council is doing around the country. There's over 100, almost roughly 100 councils around the country. And then finally, in December, we have on December 8th, Dr. Susan Shirk coming up from San Diego. Yes. She's wonderful. She's fantastic, as Dr. Green has just mentioned. She actually is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State of the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs, with responsibility of China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Mongolia. And she's currently the chair of the 21st Century China Center down there at UC San Diego. And she just now, within the last week or so, just released a new book called Overreach: How China Derailed Its Peaceful Rise. So we're definitely looking forward to seeing everybody at those upcoming events and hopefully at some of the other events coming up in the coming year. So this is the time of our event that we transition to our annual general meeting items. I have to tell you, I am extraordinarily honored to be able to be up here to be the person that presents an award this evening. It's an award that's been going on for 50 some odd years here with the council, and periodically we give it. It's called the Orange Globe Award. And what it's given to periodically over the years to people that are involved in the council and really show a true dedication to our mission. Again, the mission being to raise the profile of international affairs, to have discussions that are nonpartisan, and to bring top experts from around the world here. Judge Tully Seymour is our honoree this evening. And I have to tell you, I've worked now with Judge Seymour for 4 or 5 years. He's one of those individuals, when you first meet him, you're thinking, okay, I haven't heard him say much, but the minute you do hear him speak, you listen. He's one of those very, very thoughtful individuals who, when he speaks, everybody in the room stops to listen because they know it's going to be a very valuable contribution. He's been on our executive board for how many years now, Tully? He's lost count. I've lost count. I probably should have. Jeanette will know. She'll know. A long time. So I do have to tell you, I'm extraordinarily honored to be able to present this award this evening, and I'd like to welcome you up on stage. If you'd like to. Actually, I can bring down. There we go.
Ready for the award.
All right.
Right over here. That is beautiful. My gosh. I'm not sure I deserve this.
You do, absolutely. Thank you so much. Here we go. Okay, the next second half of our annual general meeting portion right here, I'd like to welcome up on stage our chair-elect, Bill Edwards. He's been the co-chair of the nomination committee that's been meeting periodically for the last few months, and their role is to bring in new trustees each year to the World Affairs Council. And so Bill's going to be coming up here and doing that business this evening.
Hello, everyone, and I want to second everybody's comments about Tully. Where did he go? There he is. Congratulations. It says here, and I printed out in big type so I could read it. I'll present the AGM PowerPoint. So every year we look at the number of trustees that we have, and some trustees go away. And now this year we've got these new trustees that are coming on to the World Affairs Council. There's a total of 69 trustees. I'm going to try to read the names, but I know a couple I'm not going to get right. Mr. Darrell Grossman, Mr. Jan Killy. If you're here, please raise your hand. Rod Maxon, Miss Patrice DeSales, Jane Herring. I know Jane's here. Yep, there she is. Rima Nashabichi. Yeah, okay, well, that's close. I probably get Stacy Keeley's name right. And Christopher Lynch, that was a good one. And Dave Rice and Marco Cariello. And now, Victoire, I know I got that part right, but Auguste Domiel. Ah. And then Craig Boardman. So I would like now to ask that the members approve this trustee slate by acclamation. Is that acceptable? All right, okay. All right. Now I have one more thing to do, and that is to read the name of the executive board members for 2022 and 2023. Some of you are here. If you are, please raise your hand. Susan Bosch, there she is, okay. Bill Edwards, Nando Guerrera, Saji Gundawarni, Helen Haig is going to be our secretary. Jeff Hobart is past chair. There he is, okay. Kyle Longley will be co-chair of the program committee. Chris Lynch is a member at large, and we're going to suck him into strategic planning. Rod Maxon, Manuel Marquez. Manuel, there he is right there, okay. Kendra Purvier, Rick Putnam will be vice chair. Tully Seymour, we're getting him, keep him working with us. Anita Sokolsky, Serge Tomasian. Where's Serge? I know there he is, okay. Rose Ty, our own Nora Valenzuela, and Paul Van. Thank you all for volunteering. We're going to make great use of your time. And now I'm going to briefly, it says briefly introduce Dr. Richard Downey. Dr. Downey has not only had a very distinguished career in the U.S. military, thank you for your service, but has been involved in a number of nonprofits, and he's also been head of nonprofits before, and he is now our president. And he's the one that got me to become a member of the Pacific Council, by the way. So, Dr. Downey, it's all yours.
Well, good evening. Thank you. Thank you, those who did that. I appreciate that. Could we try that one more time? Good evening. Oh, much better, much better. Thank you. Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here. And as Jeff mentioned, this is my first event as the president, CEO of the World Affairs Council of Orange County. So I am really proud to be here, and it's great to see all of you here tonight. And I am thrilled to be able to introduce our speaker for tonight, Dr. Jerrold Green. And not only is he the president and CEO of the Pacific Council on International Policy, he's also my friend. So that's why it's a personal privilege and pleasure to do this. And so we don't spend the next 15 minutes. Jerry has such a distinguished and impressive career. If you'll forgive me, Jerry, but I'm just going to pick out a handful of highlights because he really has an impressive career, and I hope you all will take a look. But just a few highlights to let you know. He, along with his job as president CEO of the Pacific Council, he's concurrently a professor at the Annenberg School of Communications and Journalism at USC. He's been a professor at the University of Michigan. Also was the director of the Center of Middle East Studies at the University of Arizona. He worked at the RAND Corporation as the director of the Center for Middle East Public Policy, where he received RAND's Award for Excellence. Not surprising. Jerry was a Fulbright scholar. I know we've talked tonight, I guess, Lisa, and Derek, your daughter is looking at being a Fulbright scholar. I don't know if there's any others in here, but Jerry was 3 years in Egypt study as a Fulbright scholar. He also did research in Iran on the Iranian Revolution. So tough place to do business, but that's Jerry's wheelhouse in the Middle East, and it really is something. But let me tell you a few other things that he does, that has done. For 8 years, Jerry was on the Secretary of the Navy's advisory panel. That's a very accomplished and distinguished place to be for 8 years. That's really saying something. Also, you may just, as an aside, for over the last 10 years, Jerry has been a reserve deputy of the Sheriff's Office of LA County. And for years before that, he was a reserve policeman working in intelligence and terrorism issues. So has done tremendous things, and he's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So again, I'm looking for a very, very interesting discussion with Jerry tonight. Will you please help me welcome our very distinguished speaker tonight, Dr. Jerry Green. So what we're going to do right now, thank you, Bill, is for about 25 minutes, Dr. Green and I, Jerry and I will have a conversation just about some issues around the world. We talked about this is serious challenges to U.S. national security, and the way we've been kind of marketing this is global hotspots. But after that, it's your turn to answer questions, and the way to do that, I should have it. And Bill, if you'd please hold up that little green ticket. If you have a question, please write it on that real green slip that's on your tables. There should be pens there as well. If you'll raise it up, hold up your hand, we'll have either Sydney or Lindsay or maybe Norbu there. We'll come pick it up and we'll ask that question of Jerry. So. You have a chance, so be thinking about it as we go through here. But and we'll go over some other things. But let's get started talking about hotspots. And Jerry, I think the first hotspot, before we get talking about hotspots around the world, let's talk about the hotspot right here in Orange County, because it is hot today. It has been hot. It has been really hot. Today is not as bad, I have to say. Today was not as bad as it's been, but it's been amazing. We're in drought restrictions. You know, we have it's in Indian summer. I mean, for me, it's been painful to see those images of Hoover Dam. You know, the water level and some of the other dams. It's just terrible. But it's not only in our country. You know, we've seen Europe. Some of you I know have been to Europe recently. The Rhine River, the barges can't cross the Rhine River. It's such low water levels. China suffering from drought and water shortages, severe heat. On the other hand, Pakistan, a third of the country is underwater. You know, we've been saying for years, we have just got to do something about climate change. And I'm wondering, do you think now that we're just seeing this in front of us in a very frontal way, I mean, an unavoidable way, do you think we've finally come to that point where people will say, yeah, we've got to start taking action, or is it still a ways away?
Well, I really want to thank all of you for having me back. I've actually spoken here years before, and what I knew about Orange County is what people are told in Massachusetts, where I grew up. And all of that turned out to be wrong. I will never decline an invitation to address this group. It was really interesting and memorable. So thank you for being invited back is a great compliment. So those of you who may remember, thank you for inviting me back. Second, I really was eager to speak tonight because it's Richard's first event as your new CEO. Richard is not only a quintessential gentleman, he is a scholar, he is a policy analyst, he is a soldier, he's a diplomat, and many, many other things. And so you're really lucky to have him. And we, I can't say enough good things about Richard. In terms of the answer to your question, the science I will leave to the scientists, but the policy implications of climate change are profound in ways that I'm not sure everybody realizes. Because climate change is not simply, I live in Agora, which is on the border of Ventura County, near Thousand Oaks. It's not only that we can't water our lawns, it's not only that we can't wash our cars, you can't grow food. And so that the climate issue leads into all sorts of other issues. Food security, which is a major consideration. Water security, not only the way in which we use it, but the way in which it leads to climate refugees. In other words, the Europeans are very, very upset about all of these people that are trying to make their way into Europe. How many people don't flee their homelands and go to a different climate where they are unwanted and not respected? So climate-induced refugees, there are more refugees in the world today than any time since World War II. A significant percentage of them are victims of climate change. So this idea that climate change is sort of an issue of the woke left, is just ludicrous. It is absurd. It adversely affects every single one of us. And at the end of the day, every country on the planet, and remember, California has the 5th largest economy in the world. We are a nation state. I don't like to tell people whose economies we're bigger than other countries, but I've looked, and you should look as well. And so we are a considerable power ourselves. And it's interesting, for example, that Norway is one of the highest per capita purchasers of Teslas. Not because they may like Elon Musk, I don't know. But Norway, which is a major producer of energy, realizes the importance of solar energy and other forms of energy and electric cars and other things. I was reading an article. It says downtown Oslo at rush hour. It's probably rush minute, not rush minute. Tell them about rush hour. Looks like a parking lot for Teslas. So this is not a commercial endorsement for Elon Musk, but it is a cri de coeur, a call to arms that we absolutely must deal with this issue. If not for ourselves, for our neighbors. One of the things I always tell people is Los Angeles is closer to Mexico City than we are to Washington, D.C. What happens in Mexico is local politics. We share a region with Mexico. So whatever happens in Mexico has implications for us, and conversely, whatever happens here has implications for Mexico. So you go on and on and on and on and on. Climate change is serious, it's real, it needs to be dealt with at the very, very highest level. And that's one of the things that governors of California traditionally embrace as one of their issues. They may laugh at us and other states and so forth, but at the end of the day, California is the future, only sooner. Certainly not on every issue, obviously. We have, if you want to study homelessness, come to Los Angeles. It's an epidemic. It's an epidemic. But climate change, Richard is absolutely right. This is the critical issue of our day. The other, if I may sneak another one in, the other critical issue of our day, in my view, is democracy. And it is my view that democracy is under significant threat in the United States. When you hear, the former ambassador to Brazil, who's coming to address you, you will know if Bolsonaro, who is predicted to lose the election, will actually admit that he lost, or they will have a January 6th moment in Rio, Sao Paulo, and other places. So the fate of the frailty of democracy is, in my view, as important, not more important than climate change, but it's pretty close.
Go good. Yes. No. Thank you, Jerry. Matter of fact, why don't we follow up on your Bolsonaro issue? For those of you who aren't aware, in Brazil right now, the Brazilian presidential election is coming up in about 2 weeks, the 2nd of October, and right now Bolsonaro, the current president, is behind by about 10 percentage points. But he is saying, well, polls are wrong. And I'm going to win. And if I don't win, it's because it's been rigged. You heard that before. Yeah. So so the expectation is that, and by the way, the other presidential candidate, Lula Ignacio da Silva, is not a great candidate. Neither one of them this is not a great choice between the two of them. But Bolsonaro is one of the expectations is that he could lean on the military. The military has a lot of military entrenched in his government, and so it could be very well that he'd look at the military to keep him in power, or the police. The police are very supportive of him because there's sweeps through the favelas, the slums in Brazil, and Bolsonaro has proposed that any policeman who kills somebody, that happens a lot in these sweeps, will be protected, and so he's favored by the police. So the thought is, if he doesn't, if the military doesn't support him, perhaps there'll be an insurrection and the police will not do anything. So what do you think about that? In the possibility? How do you think that democracy is going to fare?
Look, Lula, as Richard said, is not a dream. He did a little time. Actually did more than a little time. He is not a dream candidate by any means. Richard is absolutely right. But in an odd way, as they say in the mob, he did his time like a man. They sent him to prison, and he hasn't become an enemy or an opponent of democracy or the rule of law, despite being on the wrong side of the rule of law. So, standards are a little bit different there than they are here. Bolsonaro is a former military officer, and what we're looking at potentially is a military coup d'etat, put simply, and that is a disaster. There's a group of countries that everybody ignores: Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia. These are sort of not, France, England, Russia, China, the United States, but they are also not, I'm not going to mention, the lesser countries. These are sort of big, potentially rich, influential regional and sometimes international players. So what happens in Brazil, which is an enormous place, is really consequential for Latin America and for the future of democracy, which frankly is not doing too well. Bolsonaro ignored COVID to the detriment of many of his country people. He is not only ignoring, fostering the destruction of the Amazon, which is a climate change issue, because without the Amazon, these major green areas, global warming occurs even more rapidly. So this is not, a situation where a philosophical, good-natured difference of opinion of well-meaning people. There are certain people that are not well-meaning and that really are a threat to the stability of their own countries. And not only the stability, the prosperity, and Bolsonaro is one of those. And there's a lot of them in the world today. You look at Erdogan in Turkey, you look what's going on in the Philippines, you certainly look at Russia, even China, which was never a democracy, but she is positioning himself in a very different way than his predecessors. When Viktor Orban is a keynote speaker at anything in Dallas, Texas, and I used to live in Dallas, I find that profoundly disturbing. And for him to be sort of this inspirational figure is just antithetical to the values that we believe. And at the end of the day, democracy relies on a vibrant, healthy, two-party system. I'm a registered independent because I have to be for my job. But at the end of the day, I want to see both parties thrive. I want to see them kick the hell out of one another, but in a constructive way, not in a destructive way. So that, if Party A can do something wonderful, Party B opposes it just because they don't want Party A to do something wonderful. That's the difference. I always think of Tip O'Neill, I'm from Boston, so my sainted congressman, and Ronald Reagan, who had zip in common, but those two old boys love to sit back and knock back a few after work and, you know, kind of do the business of the republic. And without that, our democracy really is threatened, and this is having a global impact. Sorry, I'm going beyond, but these, you know, it's funny, we were talking about political science with a small, we're both, a number of us are political scientists with a small s, that, you know, we're not real, they would hate me at the American Political Science Association, so what happens here stays, and Costa Mesa stays here. But, you know, political science, you know, the more scientific it aspires to be, the less relevant it is and the less impact it has. But at the end of the day, these issues are all related. They're all related. We really need to care about democracy in Budapest because we're committed to democracy in the United States. And conversely, the more democracy deteriorates here, the more the brand is threatened. And when the brand is threatened, it has a global impact. And no matter, you know, all this America First stuff, which I always found kind of a fiction, to be honest, so I'm revealing some of my views here. If the United States does not provide inspirational and global leadership to the rest of the world, who will? And it sure as hell is not Bolsonaro, Erdogan, Vladimir Putin, President Xi, AMLO in Mexico. There's a long list of people who certainly have nothing inspirational to share with the rest of the world. So, sorry.
Oh, thanks, Jerry. You know, I want to take advantage of the fact that Jerry is a member of the Taiwan Global Institute's bipartisan task force on U.S.-Taiwan relations in the 21st century, which is that's really quite a coup to be on that task force right now. So I wanted to ask you, Jerry, if you know, last month Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan and just it caused a huge reaction by China. For those, I'm sure you all follow that, the large military exercises that China did outside of Taiwan in the seas around there, and it was impressive, and it was a new precedent. And so Taiwan now has kind of come back, and they've shot down one of China's drones, and now we see a constant stream, actually, since Pelosi. We've seen other congressional delegations, governors coming to Taiwan, but I wonder now, did Nancy Pelosi's visit set a new baseline between China and Taiwan? I mean, this military exercise, that was really scary. But I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, one thing is, you noted I clapped when I heard Susan Shirka's coming from UCSD. She is a globally respected expert on China. So we're having her too at the Pacific Council in LA. She's really, really good, and she has a new book. And what she's dealing with in the book, and those of us who think about these things are thinking about, it's a new era. It's a new era. Back in the day, the U.S. policy towards Taiwan was called strategic ambiguity. Strategic ambiguity. We have an embassy in Taipei. It's not called an embassy. It's called an institute. We have an ambassador in Taipei. She or he is called the director of the American Institute in Taipei. And we have this little dance that we do with Beijing in which we all pretend that our policy towards Taiwan is somewhat different than it is. As Xi has continued to assert himself, as he's doing his Putin routine, but in a much more lethal, challenging way than Putin. This guy, you know, Xi is Putin is kind of this has-been who never was. Don't say that to the Ukrainians, because people are losing their lives. But at the end of the day, Putin is fighting from a position of weakness. Xi is from a position of strength, despite challenges to the Chinese economy and other things that are going on. And a consequence of this is many of our allies and friends in the Indo-Pacific region have come to the United States and say, hey, what are you going to do about this? You know, you really need to stand up and kind of, you know, make the Chinese know that you are committed to regional security. And what the Chinese have been doing is pretty awful. Not only Tibet, not only Hong Kong, not only the oppression, the genocide towards Muslims in Xinjiang within China, not only the creation of fake islands that are actually military facilities, and on and on and on. So that Taiwan has come to have a new significance, a significance it didn't used to have. The Taiwan task force that Richard mentioned, the chair of this, and this will I'll tell you an interesting story, is Robert O'Brien. Robert O'Brien was President Trump's last national security advisor. Robert and I are pals. We go back forever. I didn't vote for his boy, and I never will, but I like Robert a lot, and I have a lot of respect for him. And so Robert called me. He said, "I want you to join the task force." I said, "Is it political?" He said, no, it's nonpartisan. I said, "I'm in." And there's a bunch of, I'm an independent. There are Democrats, Republicans. A lot of my friends in LA, you're on this task force, you're working with I mean, the world has become our world is a very different place, For me to get heat for joining a task force that's chaired by, somebody who's, is a respected public servant and a patriot, and a good guy, despite, the failings of his boss, shows you how things have changed. And so that one of the things we're looking at is how do we message our support for Taiwan? The Chinese are watching Ukraine really, really closely. The West has stood up on behalf of Ukraine very, very quickly. And one of the unspoken pieces of our support for Ukraine is intelligence sharing, that we have ways to sort of monitor what's going on in cyberspace, on the battlefield, and elsewhere, and we are sharing some of this information with the Ukrainians. So you take this, and then you take their inherent courage, their patriotism, their commitment to their own country. It's really, really powerful. Compare this to what happened in Afghanistan, where things didn't turn out as well. So the Afghans are for reasons we won't go into now, were different partners than the Ukrainians, sadly and tragically. So China's watching this, and on one hand, they don't want to look like they're backing down. It might make them a little bit more bellicose, aggressive towards Taiwan, and to wit, Nancy Pelosi's visit, which led to these military exercises. The flip side is she has domestic problems or problems with the economy and other things. So he kind of is trying to figure this out to determine what the best course of action is. And we are recalibrating our not our task force, the United States government is recalibrating its relationship with Taiwan. Taiwan's kind of coming out of the closet and being observed and treated like a real country, which is as it should be. Which, Beijing should not dictate to Washington how we deal with Taipei. But for many, many years, that was the case. The question is, by pushing that envelope, will we push too far? And this is the time to look for envelope pushing. We're all excited that Ukraine did so well this past week in chasing the Russians. What if the Russians, out of desperation, use a tactical nuclear weapon? And this is certainly a tactical nuclear. We got a colonel here, so if I screw this up, say it more correctly than I will. But a tactical nuclear weapon is a nuclear device that can be used on a battlefield. It's not Nagasaki and Hiroshima. It's much more focused and it's much more contained. But it's Chernobyl quality fallout and destruction and so forth. And the Russians have lots of them. At what point will Putin be desperate enough to consider using a tactical nuclear weapon? The other thing he's got is cyber capabilities that are very, very powerful and very, very frightening. And chemical weapons which they used in Syria. In other words, chemical weapons were deployed in Syria, at the behest of Hafez al-Assad, but deployed by the Russians. So they have a history of doing this. The Wagner Group, which, mercenaries is a kind term for them. These are basically irregular, they're more than mercenaries. They are permitted to do tasks that the conventional military is not willing to do or capable of doing. So this, again, forgive me for, you start with Taiwan. We really need to be thinking globally on everything and look for the interrelations amongst all of these conflicts and all of these problems. Because suddenly you sneeze in Kyiv and somebody in Taiwan is going to get the cold. More in a way than has historically been the case. The planet is shrinking and not in a great way.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jerry. There's a lot of things I'd like to follow up on, as you just mentioned there. By the way, it's probably worth mentioning about nuclear weapons. For those of you who don't follow that closely, and I know some of you do, some of the folks in the room here do, but it's the nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons. In the 50s, the U.S. military thought that we could actually use those as a tactical weapon to, on the battlefield. It was just a larger weapon. And, oh, thank you, Lindsay. But the consensus was that, you're crossing the nuclear threshold, it's not a good idea, and we can get combat effects, destructive effects from conventional weapons the same way. So the U.S. doesn't have tactical nuclear weapons. The Russians didn't get that message, or they didn't believe that. And so they continue to have nuclear weapons that they can use on the battlefield, which, again, for them, they consider it just another weapon, but it crosses the nuclear threshold. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. So for us, and so just talking your point, but I would like to get into, you've touched on a number of things I want to follow up on. China, for one thing, I think China has been building up militarily for years, and they have invested a lot in it. They've stolen a lot of our technology and are putting it to good use in their own military. But on the other hand, we're seeing some chinks in that armor. For example, you're seeing this year, the expectation is that China's economic growth is about 3%, where their target was 5.5%. You're seeing a lot of discontent with their COVID restrictions, and because they haven't been very productive as well. There's youth unemployment, high youth unemployment, about 20% in China. We're seeing real estate problems. I mean, there's the aging population, demographic decline, all those things. And the issue now is, let's look at China. Yes, it's rising military, but there's all these other problems that it's having. Has China peaked, or is it? The idea was the thinking was it was going to be this juggernaut that would dominate the globe soon enough. But we're seeing these other pieces. Has China peaked really, or is there's just a pause along the way? What do you think, Jerry?
I don't think China has peaked, and I was never a panda hugger. People who were, whatever Beijing wants, they get, so you can get visas and go do research and all of that stuff. But I've always believed, and I still believe, the planet's big enough for both us and the Chinese. Having said that, the bad actor component of China has never been more evident than it is now. There's a Chinese consulate in Los Angeles with 50 accredited diplomats. There's another one in San Francisco with another 50. Do we really think these 100 people are giving out visas, registering births? Maybe registering births because people come here to have babies. But, the bad actor component of this is genuine and real. And it's just the way, I sort of hunger for a healthy Republican and Democrat party. And I'm sorry to say this with the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party here, because I want to grandparent his party in. But, you need a health, no matter how many parties you have, you need some healthy rivalry. They need to talk to one another. They can't, pretend the other doesn't exist. They're all, and it's the same with China. We don't want China to peak. We don't want China to fall apart. If China falls apart and it gets desperate, suddenly, Hong Kong is completely gone. And much of the action in Hong Kong is now moving to Singapore anyway because of what the Chinese have done. And it makes, the risks of making a move on Taiwan are suddenly not as, the risk is still there, but the ROI is potentially there because, China can't manage its own affairs. So you want China, it's just like, we don't want them to get COVID because we're gonna catch it. We don't want China to fall apart because it's bad for everybody. We just want them to color within the lines. And this is sort of one of Xi's, problems, is he is responsible for taking China in this very bellicose direction, which I believe is to the detriment of China and to the detriment of the region. But I don't think we should write it off. If we ever had a war with China, that's a war that nobody would win. A war that nobody would win. So the question is, how do you contain China? How do you manage China? How do you, and I still say it, how do you find a way to engage them? Less so than was the case in prior years, but we can't simply ostracize them. Those of us who are my age, I'm probably the only one of my age in here, remember when we were kids, Red China. You remember Red China? Those were not good times, and when Nixon, despite all the things they say about Nixon, he and Kissinger had the opening to China. This was a transitional moment in human history and really, really important. So what we should be looking for is some way to kind of, share the planet with the Chinese, which is to the benefit of the planet.
Oh, thanks, Jerry. We're closing in on time for your questions, so I have a whole bunch more here, but let me just ask you one more.
Sure.
Because we have a whole lot of questions to get to here. We'll get to as many as we can. You did touch on Ukraine briefly. And it's almost 7 months. We've got another 10 days before it'll be 7 months since Russia invaded Ukraine. And for months there, it seemed like the war had devolved into a war of attrition and a stalemate. But this past week, we've seen some great successes, which you referred to there at Kharkiv, and there have been some success in the south of Kherson. It's, of course, the Russians have painted that success as saying, no, this is it's all going according to plan, and we're just regrouping. And it's interesting, though, that, and they're still referring to it as a special military operation, not a war, and in fact, Russia has not mobilized. I mean, they still haven't cranked up their industries to fight or to produce artillery shells. That's why they're going to North Korea right now for artillery shells. They're not getting manpower that they need. They're using mercenaries, doing all kinds of incentives. And it's interesting that recently, just recently, we're seeing these critics on Russian TV are now criticizing the Russian military. Not so much Putin, a little bit. That's scary if you're doing that in Russia. But there's criticism there, and we're even hearing, I think you probably all heard today about the flare-up between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And there was talk that the weakness, or the poor performance, I should say, of Russians in Ukraine was one of the reasons why that Azerbaijan was emboldened to take the kind of action to go after this. So I'm wondering, do you see Putin responding in a way that puts Russia on a war footing to respond because they're looking bad? Or is he just going to continue to crank away at this in just a step-by-step way, is what Russians typically do? What do you think, Jerry?
What I think Putin is counting on and is waiting for is winter. And the reason he's waiting for winter is the resolve of a cold Europe, a Europe with factories that can't operate to full capacity because fuel is unaffordable, might then destroy or weaken the coalition of Western nations that are supporting Ukraine. Now, it's not going to fall on us in the United States. We have our own sources of energy and so forth. But having said that, Russia loves winter. It kept Napoleon out. It kept Hitler out. This is sort of flipping flipping winter. But I think that he believes if he can hold on to winter, which he certainly can, that things may change. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. There's a very small, interesting article this week in The Economist that the Norwegians are being made to feel guilty because they're making so much. Norway's a very rich country, and they have the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, bigger than the UAE or Qatar or Saudi or whatever, and they're making money hand over fist because of energy sales to the rest of Europe. And, you know, they're feeling kind of guilty about it. You know, they're being made to feel guilty, and people are going to say, what's Norway going to do? But my sense is that Putin is going to wait and see what winter brings. The other thing is, I don't think mobilization in Russia means much. You know, so they reestablished the draft, so they will have more poorly trained, under-equipped, you know, incompetent people who can't wait to throw their rifle on the ground and run away. It's not like, you know, the A team is being held back and, you know, oh, they're going to deploy. They don't have an A team. China has an A team. Russia doesn't have an A team, and that's why they have the Wagner Group, which are mercenaries, and they're bringing in, you know, other nationalities and so forth. So Putin is not going to give in. He's not going to quit. He's not going to stop because he doesn't have a choice. He doesn't have a choice. He's sort of, those of you who play poker, he is pot committed. He is, you know, pushed so much into the middle of the table that he's not going to be able to walk away from it. But I think he really hopes that winter is going to be a game changer for us and the Europeans. Remember, Macron in France months ago was telling the Ukraine to make territorial concessions and make a deal. And Kissinger said the same thing. So there are people, you know, arguing that Ukraine ought to not throw in the towel, but, you know, sort of give up more than they're willing to give up now. And Putin is well aware of that, and I think is banking on the fact that that may help him.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jerry. And the point about Russian energy squeezing Europe is really a good one, but I don't know if you were paying homage to Game of Thrones. Any Game of Thrones? Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
For those of you who are Game of Thrones fan, winter is coming is a very important signal in that series. So I didn't know if that was a subtle homage or not. But, okay, well,
so,
well done.
I met one of your new board members, and I said, "Welcome aboard." And I thought, God, am I clever? But I didn't really mean to say that. It just came out that way. So.
Well done, I will say. Let me. We've got a lot of questions here for you, I'm going to just kind of open this up. The first one here is actually. This is for me, actually. Richard, were you referring to Hillary Clinton when you said, "Where have we heard that before?" When I was referring to Bolsonaro and talking about if I lose, then it's the election was lost. By the way, as Jerry alluded to, I'm an independent as well, so I have to be. And thank you, Jerry, for mentioning that. So and this was, although that actually is on the cover of The Economist magazine. Sort of, you know, the would-be Trump is the idea of the cover of that. But if you talk about what Jerry's points were with democracy, it's on both sides. It's all over. I mean, after the 2016 election, there was a tremendous outpouring of this couldn't be, this election cannot be right. It happened after 2020, and it seems to be on both sides. And that's, I think, what you're getting at, Jerry, in terms of of democracy. You know, we aren't willing, perhaps. That's one of the things that it's not only the election in Brazil, for example. Bolsonaro is saying that if Lula wins, the opposite candidate, if he wins, the devil will take over Brazil. I mean, he's painting the opposition as the devil. And we're seeing that happen. It's just a bad place. But let's go on to another question. We haven't addressed your India. Knowing India's policy of remaining a strategic neutral actor between the East and the West, is there a way for the U.S. to convince India to stand with them on foreign issues, most notably for the U.S. to grant security guarantees against China's string of pearls maneuvers in the Sri Lanka, Pakistan.
India is, actually. I mean, India is remained pretty neutral on Ukraine. But India also, I must tell you an Orange County story quickly. This will all come together. I was in the lobby. I got here a bit early, and this woman walks through and looks familiar, and I said, "Jane, is that you?" And so the Australian Consul General was walking through the lobby of the Westin. The consulate's in Los Angeles, and she is the former Australian ambassador to ASEAN, which is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And, it shows you that California is so important that they send, a lot of these countries send their A-teams. So Australia is part of something called the Quad. The Quad is an alliance which says it's not a strategic alliance, but it's a strategic alliance involving India, the United States, Japan, and Australia. So India is part of this. The Chinese laugh about it, they make fun of it, they dismiss it, which means that it's probably on the right track. So India and the United States and Australia and Japan are involved in the Quad in a way that sort of answers the question. The flip side is India tends to be neutral, but kind of having a certain sympathy for Russia in terms of Ukraine, which is, antithetical to what we want and antithetical to our values. I don't like it, but I'm not President Modi, and, he has his own calculation. So, India is one of those countries. I should have, when I mentioned Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, India is another one. A huge, very, very important country. The worse Pakistan seems to do, the better India seems to do, and India is big enough and important enough that it can go its own way. So it is siding with us strategically in the Quad. It's not in Ukraine. And then Modi has his own problems. Gandhi is probably rolling over in his grave because of Modi's, clear-cut, opposition to the Muslim population of India, which is enormous. There are, a vast number of Indians are Muslims, and the sort of extreme Gujarat-style Hindu nationalism of Modi is not something that I think is in India's interest. By the way, final point: the mayor of Los Angeles has been nominated to be ambassador to India if he gets confirmed. Yeah. That's a big if, but it's against California, is in the game.
Jerry, there's a couple of questions here on the Belt and Road Initiative, China's Belt and Road Initiative. And this one in particular is talking about the South Caucasus, Armenia, or Azerbaijan. If they succeed, how will this, if China succeeds in this Belt and Road Initiative, this new Silk Road, how do you foresee this happening? Can the United States do something to lure people away from this? How do you see this playing out?
The United States had a great opportunity with something called the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was a very, very difficult, hardly negotiated, difficult. It was really, really difficult to put this together. Secretary Clinton was behind it. John Kerry was selling. It was a great achievement. Suddenly, political interest in the United States realized TPP, we might have to give something, and the United States lost. Trump is blamed for taking us out of TPP. To be fair to Trump, we should remember that candidate Hillary Clinton, who supported TPP as Secretary of State, opposed it as candidate Hillary Clinton. So TPP died. The nations in the region were, devastated, and our credibility came into question in a way that is still hurting us. Pacific Council just hosted an event in Los Angeles 3 days ago for something called IPEF. IPEF is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. So IPEF is not a trade deal. It's not the TPP. It's sort of this, and this was, by the way, a big deal. The Secretary of Commerce was there. The U.S. Trade Rep, Ambassador Catherine Tai was there. 12 trade reps from, important Asian countries. This is a big deal, and it was held in L.A. The problem is that there's no there there. The TPP really had a lot of there there. IPEF is, let's talk about talking. Let's cooperate. It's a sort of feel-good, rather, paltry substitute for TPP. Why am I talking about this all? While we're kind of doing this stuff, the Chinese are actually getting stuff done. Not only Belt and Road, but they created their own regional TPP that Australia wants to join and others. So where we stepped up and then fled, the Chinese stepped up, and they are still there. Final story, and this is to those of you Latin America people, Latin America specialists. There's one of my friends, a member of my board, former professor at UCLA, is the ambassador to Costa Rica. She was just nominated, and she was confirmed, and she's being ambassador to Costa Rica. I watched her confirmation hearing, which was, you can watch confirmation hearings on C-SPAN, which, by the way, are not to miss. They're really, I found it's really interesting. I'd never watched before. And Ambassador Tejas, Cynthia Tejas, that is her name. So Ambassador Tejas was asked one question during the confirmation hearing. What are you going to do to counter China? This is ambassador to Costa Rica. They didn't ask about El Salvador. They didn't, nothing. The one question she was asked. So I talked to her last week. She was home in LA on home leave. So I said, Cynthia, was this China question kind of a distraction? And now she can't talk to me anymore because she's never, we're friends, but this stuff she can't tell me because, she respects classified material and documents, unlike some. And I said, was that China question, kind of weird? And she said, no. That was it. A one-word answer, no. So Belt and Road is a new Silk Road. The Silk Road never ran through Costa Rica. It didn't run through Belize. Belt and Road is a significant portion of a global initiative by the Chinese. And again, ask Susan when she comes, because we originally thought Belt and Road was kind of a predatory, lending scheme so that the Chinese could seize control of the port of, Colombo, Sri Lanka, or the Chinese now own the port in Piraeus in Greece, stuff like that. But it's much more than that. The Chinese people are wondering, how do we have all this money, for Belt and Road to give to, Kazakhstan, and we don't have money for ourselves. And I was at NATO 2 years ago, and I asked General Scaparelli, you probably know, I said, General, is NATO aware of the fact that China is knocking on its eastern door? And he said, absolutely, absolutely. So China is everywhere. Not only the 100 diplomats in California, not only Costa Rica, they are absolutely everywhere. And to your earlier question, has China peaked? Will they be able to sustain this global reach? It's a hard question to answer, but they certainly need to be watched.
Jerry, on that topic, and going back to Taiwan, there's the idea that China realizes that it has a window in which its power, it will have power at a point, it may diminish. So there's a window where some analysts think China would be able to attack Taiwan because that's when they could do it. And outside of that window, it will close and they won't be able to do it. And so it might be in this period. I don't know if the task force is looking at that.
Well, let me tell you, when I was on this Secretary of the Navy advisory panel for 8 years, and it was a lot of former Admiral Roughhead was not one of them, but a lot of very weighty 4-stars, retired 4-stars, and a few inconsequential technocrats like me. And I remember in year 1, we were given a briefing, not classified, so I can talk about it, that China is developing an aircraft carrier capability. But we really shouldn't worry about it. It will be decades before they have this capability. And I, being a civilian, so what's the issue? They build a ship, it's a bunch of iron, metal, steel. And they said, no, the magic with aircraft carriers are landings, and it takes a long, long time to master takeoffs, but primarily landings on aircraft carriers. The Chinese will not master this. 3 years in, and I'm on this panel, suddenly we're getting a briefing. The Chinese are launching the carriers. They're doing great. And I said to one of the admirals, so I said, and I was kind of teasing him. I said, so, Admiral so-and-so, you told us about, landings on aircraft carriers. And he said, it's a human capital problem. The Chinese did not worry about fatalities until they got it right and they learned how to do it. And they just, they fast forwarded, they mastered it in absolutely no time. Absolutely no time, simply because, pilots get dying until they figure out how to get it right. So there's nothing related to China that that I don't worry about, that I'm not concerned about. We don't want them to do too well, which means they take Taiwan. I don't think we want them to do too badly, so the country falls apart and there's civil wars and, all sorts of other stuff. You'd like some sort of healthy balance, and I'm not sure what that healthy balance is. I frankly don't see a simple answer to Taiwan. What the experts all say is, you turn Taiwan into a porcupine, and you make it impossible to invade, and you can't do amphibious landings, and they've got all of these answers. And I'm just not really convinced by any of them. I think all the Chinese need to do is starve them, and yeah, there could be a Berlin-style airlift to Taiwan. There could be, we could perhaps find a way to circumvent that. But the question is, how long are we going to do it? And not all political interests in the United States favor that. Not, there are those, significant weighty political interests in the United States that, are kind of isolationists. They don't call themselves that, but that's what they are. And, that's a problem of a whole other form.
Jerry, this is another one right on your wheelhouse here. Palestine, Israel.
Yeah.
Where are we headed?
Well, Rima, you may not know that the name Nashashibi in my world is a revered name. There are two, Palestinian families who are synonymous with the Palestinians as people going back into prehistory. One of them is Nashashibi. So when somebody in my field meets somebody named Nashashibi, we kind of sit up straight, we stand up straight, it's, So look, I am a big supporter of Israel, and I always have been. And I'm a big supporter of democracy, which I always have been. And I believe that until the Palestine problem is resolved in a way that guarantees the security and prosperity of the state of Israel and guarantees the prosperity and stability of Palestine, and the Palestinian people get what they deserve every much, and I'm Jewish, so every bit of what we wanted as a people, a Jewish state, the Palestinians are no less entitled to their dream, which is having a Palestinian state. And until that is achieved, I believe Israel is at risk. Not necessarily physically, although, if the Palestinians took a page out of Nelson Mandela's book or Martin Luther King's book and started, sort of marched on Israel and demanded equal rights, I don't know how the Israelis would respond. But it's also the question of Israel has the most vibrant one of the most vibrant democracies in the world. But you can't be a democracy if a significant portion of your population is deprived of the same rights as another portion of the population. And, the West, the occupied territories, as I call it, I do not call it Judea and Samaria. I never have. I believe this is an occupation which is detrimental to the national security of the state of Israel. Israel is going to be at risk. Having said all of that, nobody except Rima and I, may pay any attention to this issue. Nobody really cares. The Abraham Accords, which is a tremendous accomplishment, a peace treaty between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Sudan, that's all great. And I do not fault Egypt or, any of these countries that make peace with Israel. And people say, well, it's at the expense of the Palestinians. I don't really blame them. The UAE, has its own interests, and it's not the Palestinian people. They have, the Emirati people. They have their own issues. But I think anybody, and I'll get a ton of heat on this, who is a friend of Israel, needs to be attentive to the Palestine question needs to prize Israeli democracy, and needs to find a way that the Palestinians get what they so richly deserve. I was talking to a guy just last week. We were speaking in Hebrew, an Israeli guy, and I speak Hebrew pretty well, and we were talking about something. He said, that Palestine nonsense, you know. And I said, you know, Habibi in Hebrew is Habibi. So I said, Habibi, as opposed to Habibi. You could not be so wrong. You know, if Israel's so great, why are you living in Los Angeles? So, you know, it's really important. It never comes up. Nobody talks about it. And I just think it's tragic, you know, you know, as a Jewish American with deep ties to Israel. My first wife's Israeli. My kids speak Hebrew. You know, all of that stuff. You know, I take it as a personal disappointment. You know, that Palestine is not being addressed the way it should. But I don't blame the Sudanese or the Moroccans or the Emiratis or the Egyptians. You know, what the Egyptians have always used to say is the Arab world is willing to fight Israel to the last drop of Egyptian blood. They fought all the wars. And the Egyptians kind of, you know, finally wised up and, you know, went their own way. But it's important, and you should be honored to have Anasha Shibi as one of your members. That's a big deal. Anyway.
Gosh, there are so many good questions here. We have a little bit of time. There's
My answers are too long.
No, this is wonderful. You're touching on a lot of them. But let's, and I'm trying to combine a few here to get some of these great questions in. This one's about the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. You know, and the question is, can the United States or the United Nations do something to help to separate this, you know, the fighting around the Zaporizhia nuclear plant, and to combine that with, you know, is there a way that we can give Putin an out, you know, a diplomatic out, so that he can declare victory in some way and end this war, you know, just through a negotiated manner? Do you think he'd even take that option?
You know, lots of people have had broken hearts trying to figure out Putin and what he wants and what he means and so forth. The UN is only as good as the willingness of the parties that it's trying to influence to comply. And the menace here is incalculable. And it's a new, you know, and Zelensky was right. This is a weapon of mass destruction. You know, today's the day after 9/11. It's 9/12. You know, the airplanes that crashed into the Twin Towers in New York and the Pentagon and so forth were weapons of mass destruction. You know, generally WMD are chem, bio, and nuclear. But, you know, there are other forms of WMD. And a factory, a building, a nuclear power plant can in fact be a WMD. And what we should all fear is that Putin will overplay his hand. So the short answer to that, short by Jerry's standards, I guess, I really don't know. I don't know what could be offered to Putin so that he will back off. But it's if on one hand we care too much, he'll think, aha, I have a powerful asset. I'm really going to ride this pony till it drops. So we show too much interest, you know, that may make him dig in his heels farther. If we don't show enough interest, we're putting, you know, a significant portion of the planet at risk. So it's serious.
Well, I'm going to try and get you through a lightning round here, a few, because there's some just really good points here. This one, you and I talked about a little bit about this, the CHIPS Act. You know, the semiconductors. You know, with the fact that we see that in Taiwan and China, you know, the supply chains can be stopped easily. We're seeing this now, and we're trying to move this now into other countries here in North America. Could you talk a little about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, what we were actually, and Richard knows more about it than I do, but we just signed a deal. Gina Raimondo from LA, the Secretary of Commerce, went from LA to Mexico City with Secretary of State Blinken, and we signed some sort of agreement with the Mexicans on joint chip production, which I haven't been this happy, you know, since you know, 2 for $1 day at McDonald's or something. I mean, this was really, really good news. Not only that we're going to produce chips, we found something to collaborate with Mexico on that resonates well in Mexico City and Washington. So if this deal actually becomes a reality, it is great for everybody. The other thing is to produce, chips and other things in the United States. I was telling somebody that the North American headquarters for Hyundai is in Fountain Valley. And the CEO of Hyundai North America is a fabulous, he's on my board, so I know him pretty well. He's a fabulous guy. He's the only non-Korean on the Hyundai board back in Seoul, and he's the global COO for Hyundai. And he was at this event with Secretary of Commerce Raimundo, and I introduced him to the Secretary of Commerce. And I said, Madam Secretary, I want you to meet Jose Munoz from Hyundai. They have committed, and she said, I know, $5.6 billion to build a battery factory in Georgia. Stuff like that is really, really powerful. And that's the kind, not only generating jobs in Georgia, which is in the United States, which is good, but developing a degree of self-sufficiency in battery production and chip production. And that should be at the very, very top of our list. My real dream was to do stuff like this in California, but I haven't met a business person yet that says, oh, the business climate here is great, I want to expand my business. All my friends are moving to Austin, Texas. So that's a whole other conversation. But these are really positive trends, particularly with Mexico.
It really is.
You should give a talk on this in 6 months, because this is your
this is a big deal. I mean, this is if there's a way to really reach out to Mexico in a positive way that helps us too. Yeah. This is it. Absolutely. So this is an interesting question here. In 1922, we had just come out of the war to end all wars. The stage was being set for World War II, as we saw. Now, 100 years later, is the world a safer place or is it more dangerous?
Oh, I think it's infinitely more dangerous because the world is a much smaller place than it was then. 1922, there was no nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons ended World War II. And there's nuclear proliferation, which I always worry about. The fact that Pakistan has a nuclear arsenal but can't perform the most basic functions should keep all of us up at night. This is really, really frightening. And the fact they are so desperate for money, the Saudis may want to buy a nuke. Where do you go? 1-800-Islamabad. The Pakistanis might be willing to sell it. North Korea. I mean, the least responsible nations have these incredibly devastating weapons, and I will never be convinced that there's perfect security of these weapons. So that's the first thing. The second is our global mobility. Something will happen in Wuhan, and suddenly people are dying all over the planet. And I am not blaming the Chinese for COVID, but the world is a much smaller place. We're all vulnerable to one another's challenges and problems. And governments and countries ain't what they used to be. All you need is someone with a particular dread disease to cross a border, or somebody, with cyber capabilities to shut things down or disrupt things, or fissionable materials being transported over borders. No, we're talking about dangers that they couldn't have even imagined in 1922 or World War II. I fear for our kids, people my age, my kids and my grandkids, because it's really frightening.
Well, let me just double up here a little bit. So you just mentioned cyber, and then we had a question on cyber warfare. You mentioned about the Russians earlier, but could you talk about it on a global level? But also, there's why would the world move away from fossil fuels when there's not enough green power available to power the world? That's why Putin, for example, has the leverage he does. Could you talk about those two issues for a quick minute?
I think a sort of ideologically feel-good, ill-conceived moving away from fossil fuels is self-destructive. It's not smart. A way in which you can gradually change the balance, and ultimately, if you can make fossil fuels obsolete because you don't need them anymore, because there really is a negative component to them, or a negative quality to them, that would be great. But to sort of, cut your nose to spite your face, it makes absolutely no sense. And I often wonder, what does the Secretary of Energy do? How do they, and I'm not an expert, it's not my field, but how do they balance the different forms of of energy. So, you know, we can take care of the business of the republic while at the same time not making the, you know, while doing no harm, And that's the part that you know, that I've never quite that's the question, and I don't have the answer. I think it's not a science question as much as it's a policy question. And as a policy question, it's a political question. And you're a senator from, you know, a state where they produce fossil fuels, you can have a very different view of this if you're a senator from a state that doesn't. And that's what motivates them, and that's the essence of this system.
Real quick, because Sydney's giving me the eye here. Like, as in we got time. There's one last question on Chinese demographics.
Sure.
I mean, it's, you know, I think I mentioned earlier, China's aging population. I saw a statistic recently that said that by the end of the century, and that's a long ways away, but by the end of the century, that because of the low birth rate, they're going to be back from 1.4 billion to 800 million, which is a pretty large drop. Yeah. So, but I don't know if that's something that you all are addressing in the Taiwan.
Gender imbalance. You know, part of this is a consequence of gender imbalance. That, you know, they would not allow sonograms. Is that what they call sonograms, right? To determine the gender of a fetus. Sonograms, because if it was a female, you know, they would abort the child, or, you know, whatever. So the gender imbalance is profound. The real person, I don't know the who, some professor at UC Irvine who's a demographer who actually studies this stuff, it would be really, really interesting. And demography for, you know, big India, China, Indonesia, even Mexico, Egypt, these big countries, is really, it's a very powerful tool. I'm not I'm like you. I kind of wonder about it, but I don't have a good answer. But you're on the right, whoever asked the question, you're on the right track, and it deserves a better answer than I can give you.
Well, Jerry, let me just say, these were fantastic questions, by the way. I think we owe you a round of applause here for some really good questions. And I have to say, what you did was you put Jerry through the ringer, and wow, what a terrific! You did a fantastic job in responding to all these all around the world. Would you please join me in a fantastic round of applause for Jerry? Tonight, this is just absolutely outstanding. I mean, this was really an exciting night for me. This was my first night again as president, and to have you here back again to the World Affairs Council of Orange County. This is just a treat, a real treat, and something none of us are going to forget for any time soon, certainly. And Jerry, let me just give you a small token of our appreciation. Put this down. This is a. I'm not gonna take this out. This is a.
How beautiful.
Yes, this is not. I'll
want
put
to
this
show.
around here.
Can I?
Yes.
So it doesn't fall out.
It'll fall out.
Oh, it's two things.
It's two
Sorry.
pieces. So yes.
Sorry. It's if Jenny, you go to the World's Fair in New York, and there's this big statue of a. This is it in glass. So thank you so much.
Oh,
you
Jerry,
were too kind.
thank you so much for coming down, and I hope you will be a frequent.
Anytime.
Get back there.
I never say no to this guy, so it's easy. Thank you so much. Congratulations on your new CEO.
Oh. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just, to finish up here, let me again thank all of you for being here tonight. This has been an exciting night for all of us. I congratulate not only Judge Tully Seymour, I think that's another round of applause, please. A wonderful job for Tully. I want to thank and congratulate all of our new trustees and board members. And just remind you, we have the trustee luncheon at the Balboa Bay Club. Very nice place. It'll be a very nice event on the 25th of this month. And then just a reminder, we have actually some really interesting events coming up on the 6th of October, and this will be actually at the hotel, the Avenue of the Arts Hotel, just right across the way. Very nice on the immigration panel with Alan Burson, Alan Burke, immigration lawyer, and Louis DePoise, who's from UCI. And I'll just mention this, it's not coordinated right now, but we hope, just to let so you're aware, Prime Minister Rudd from, former Prime Minister Rudd from Australia, perhaps on the 9th of October. It's very quick after the 6th, but I hope some of you will be interested to come, because another guy who's just written a book on China, the threat from China, should be very interesting.
Rudd
So,
speaks fluent Chinese. It's funny, I just had a conversation with the Australian Consul General about Rudd. He's got a new book out. He speaks Chinese, and he is a world-class China analyst who also was head of state. Alan Burson is from San Diego. He's a former head of Customs and Border Patrol.
Right.
So Burson is really somebody you should get to know.
oh yeah, no,
He's a really good guy.
Yeah, I've worked with him before.
he's
It was
great.
very wonderful guy, wonderful guy. So we have, and Jeff described some of the other events that are coming up, but we look forward to seeing you at all those events. I know Jeff did this before, but I want to thank Sydney and Lindsay, also Norbu and Mauro for all the great help and putting this all together tonight. And I have safe travel home. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks again for all your wonderful questions and being here tonight. Good night now. Thanks.
Richard, thank you. This is great. I really enjoyed it.
To continue the surprise,
Uh-huh.
Harrison speaks fluent Mandarin.
I knew that.
Two guys to comment tonight talking about God. This guy, Jack, this guy literally can just get a laugh on him. He said the speaker is just not speaking to the mic. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, no, he's right.
Damn it, you're a jerk! Oh, you're a jerk! You're such a jerk to myself. Damn. And then I saw it with my own face, and it looks like you're on top of it. That's pretty smart. Damn it! You're back to help you. You're such a jerk to myself. And then I saw it with my own You're such a